if we're in a tightening job market, if we're in a point where people might be frustrated, hours are getting cut, there's two ways to look at that. One is to throw up your arms and say, I'm doomed for the next 30 or 40 years. The other is to say, you know what, this is a prime opportunity for innovation and to start something new.
Welcome to Pharmacy Universe, Episode 4, Finance and Education, with your host, D.E.
Hello everyone and welcome to Pharmacy Universe. You are here because you are curious to learn and engage in the profession of pharmacy and its potential advancements, but you also know that your current thoughts, knowledge, and execution are not being maximized. So our goal with this platform is to socially educate and engage the world about #pharmacy by introducing you to ideas, people, and stories to help you maximize your engagement, understanding, and hopefully to inspire you to take action.
Today's guest is a gifted visionary who followed one of his true passions in life to develop a true side hustle. He currently serves as a professor of pharmacy practice and associate dean of student success at Northeast Ohio Medical University College of Pharmacy near Cleveland, Ohio. He graduated from Ohio Northern University with his Doctor of Pharmacy and completed residency training in community and ambulatory care at the Ohio State University College of Pharmacy. After paying off more than $200,000 in non-mortgage debt, he is working to empower pharmacists and students to take control of their financial future. He is the creator of Your Financial Pharmacist blog, the co-host of Your Financial Pharmacist podcast, and a co-author of the book 7-Figure Pharmacist: How to Maximize Your Income, Eliminate Debt, and Create Wealth. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Dr. Tim Ulbrich.
Thank you, Dave. Excited to be here and a huge fan of what you're doing with the Pharmacy Universe podcast. So keep up the great work.
Tim, really appreciate you coming on the Pharmacy Universe podcast today. And I know we were kind of talking about that you had been traveling recently to actually an event where we first met, the APHA NP Day of Life. Tell us about how that was out in D.C.
Yeah, it was great. I was out in D.C. this past weekend, American Pharmacists Association, APHA Day of New Practitioner Life. Great event. I was doing a financial talk with probably, it seemed like almost 100 or so new practitioners that were there. Had a chance to talk about planning for your financial future, specifically around investing and insurance, which are two topics that sometimes get a little bit overshadowed by student loan debt, which I'm sure we'll talk about here today. And then also had a chance to do some roundtable breakouts on home buying and student loan repayment and refinancing. So great event. Love the energy at the new practitioner event. And really left feeling excited and energized about continuing to do this work around financial education. And you're right, that is the event that we had met at. So they're continuing to do a great job, APHA is, with that event.
Yeah, I honestly still recall your, it was a few years ago at the event, your session there about personal finance. And I just remember being just so pumped up because I had never heard anybody talk about personal finance in a way that I think was relatable and, from a pharmacy perspective, just something that was really interesting. And I think we both share the passion about personal finance. So, what we'll do is we'll kind of ease into this here, but I like to ask this of pretty much anybody who comes on the show because I think it's important to think about and for the listeners to get an idea of where you're coming from. But really, why did you choose to go into pharmacy and how did you end up at NEOMED and kind of being in the academic world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've only been out of school for 10 years now, but I feel like my career has taken some twists and turns, and through that has been a lot of self-reflection of the areas that I think I have strengths in and the areas that I feel like are those that I'm passionate about. So my journey to pharmacy school starts back in my senior year of high school. My parents like to joke still to this day that I wasn't necessarily the most motivated high school student. And so pursuing college opportunities and whatnot was not necessarily on the top of my agenda of things to do. And I had a great guidance counselor that said, you know what, Tim, I think you really like science, you really like math. You should really look at pharmacy school among other options. And so I actually had a senior project in my English class, October, where I had to go visit a college and write about that experience. And at the time I was playing competitive volleyball. One day, random true story, eating breakfast, and my mom brings over the mail, and there it is, a flyer from Ohio Northern University. It talks about pharmacy and talks about their men's volleyball program. And I thought, got to go check this out. So senior year, that was the project. Head on over to the cornfields of Ada, Ohio, check out Ohio Northern University, fell in love with the program, enrolled in their 06 Doctor of Pharmacy program, and really came to grow a love for the profession of pharmacy. I can't say that I fully knew and understood the role of the pharmacist right off the bat, but obviously have a great appreciation for the profession and much of what you're highlighting on your show of where the profession is going and how to bring an innovative approach and mindset to the profession. So that led to residency training at Ohio State and fell in love with academia and working with students. Brought me here at a Northeast Ohio Medical University, great institution, have been in a few different roles in community ambulatory care, developing patient care services, and most recently in academic leadership positions. And I think the journey for me is I see personal finance and academic leadership is I have a theme of professional development and a love for working with students, residents, and new practitioners to help them along their own career journey. And for me, my day job here at NEOMED, my passion for personal finance and what I'm doing with Your Financial Pharmacist really allows all of that to come together.
That's a pretty incredible story, Tim. And I think kind of two things that I want to ask you about. Because number one, I'll admit, I didn't know you were a volleyball player.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because I'm actually a sand volleyball player. I didn't play in high school, but I didn't know that. So we share that in common.
Yeah.
And number two, you talked about transitioning from Ohio State over to NEOMED.
Mm-hmm.
So what took you to the Cleveland area? Is the Cleveland area home for you originally?
Yeah, no, actually, my family's from Buffalo, New York, and my wife's family's from the Bowling Green, Toledo, Ohio area. And NEOMED is really about halfway between those, which was in part the reason for looking there. And, coming from Ohio Northern, I had vaguely heard of at the time NEO-UCOP, which is now NEOMED, and had a great position that was in community ambulatory care practice, really, really was passionate about teaching after residency experiences, and came onto the interview and fell in love with the faculty and the passion for innovation. As a new program at the time, was really willing to push the boundaries, try some new things, give me accountability. And I'm so appreciative for the experiences I've had here and the autonomy I've been given to really learn my role as an educator and to grow through those experiences.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I kind of asked about Cleveland just because I'm not sure if you're a Browns fan or not, but that's always somewhat disappointing, I think, for Ohio fans. But Ohio State, on the other hand, you got that going for you.
Yeah, and I'm a Bills fan, which I'm not sure it's much better than being a Browns fan, to be honest. So, yeah.
Okay, so you started to talk about it, and I know it's one of the things that I'm certainly. This is basically what brought us as a mutual connection. But personal finance, I think, is really one of the gaps that I see in education. I think it was something that I've always wondered about, but especially in healthcare education, that's a really big area where the personal finance is not a strong suit. So tell us about what is YFP, what is Your Financial Pharmacist, and how and why was it started?
Yeah, Your Financial Pharmacist, our mission is very simple. We help pharmacists achieve financial freedom. It's that simple. And the backstory, the quick version of it is I graduated in 2008. As I mentioned, did residency in 2009, had about $200,000 of student loan debt, actually a little bit more than that. And found myself in a situation that I think a lot of your listeners can probably resonate to. Decent income, overwhelmed by student loan debt, and facing lots of different competing priorities. So at the time, recently married, looking at home buying, I knew that I should get started with retirement. I had people telling me, you know what, you really need to make sure you have the right insurance in place and emergency funds. Oh, and by the way, you have this 200,000 pound gorilla on your back of student loan debt that most of my loans were accruing at about 6.8% interest at the time. And I remember this kind of aha moment of, I never anticipated it as a pharmacist feeling like I was going to live paycheck to paycheck. Now, I think that sounds ridiculous for somebody who's making a six-figure income, but I cannot tell you how many times I've heard pharmacists say exactly that, you know, I had this image of what it was going to look like financially after graduation, and reality comes and it's a very different picture, of course, when you're trying to work on all of these things with significant student loan debt. And I've always had a passion for personal finance. You know, I can remember back in the day, you know, reading Personal Finance for Dummies, always reading financial books about investing and strategy, and I've always been fascinated with how behavioral personal finance is. And yes, the math is important, but really the behavior behind your own financial plan. And so when I finished paying off my $200,000 student loan debt in October 2015, I started talking to some pharmacists and quickly realized that lots of people were struggling with what I thought I was living alone. And so I reached out to about 100 of my closest friends and colleagues and said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a blog that's personal finance for pharmacists. What do you think? Are you interested? And the response I got from that was incredible, telling me that we have a significant need on this topic for pharmacists to hear about this topic from another pharmacist that has walked this path and is living in their shoes. And that became the start of the YFP blog, which down the road turned into the book Seven Figure Pharmacist, the launch of the YFP podcast. And now if listeners go to yourfinancialpharmacist.com, you'll see a host of resources from budgeting to investing to student loans. And our goal, our commitment is to really help pharmacists along this journey of financial freedom and helping to take the stress that is often associated with personal finances off their back. And for us, community and empowerment are really big. I felt like through my journey, I almost felt like I was living alone through that journey. And so developing a community of pharmacists, which we have about just over 5,000 pharmacists. We've got a very active Facebook group where people can ask questions, get encouragement and support, sharing their struggles, and empowering people to feel like they can tackle this topic that can become so overwhelming are really the two keys of what we're trying to do at YFP.
Yeah, I mean, when I go to your website currently, it's been very awesome just to see kind of the changes in the growth and, you know, some of the things that you guys have done over the past couple of years. But, I mean, you know, there's everything on there. If you have a question basically about something in the financial world and it's healthcare, pharmacy related, or you're a student pharmacist, you're a new practitioner. I mean, you guys even have, a student loan course now that's running?
Yeah. Yep.
Even a podcast. I was listening to the podcast, your podcast the other day about buying a car. That was kind of a scenario that Kristen and I have been in here. But yeah, I mean, it's really awesome because, like I said, I think personal finance is just something that is just not covered very well in academia and especially in healthcare. So,
and Deep, just real quick on that one point, one of the things I learned recently is that, interestingly enough, on the medicine side of things, LCME, which is the accrediting body for colleges of medicine, they actually have some accreditation standards around financial literacy and personal finance education. And one of my career goals and missions, and I could use the help of anyone in your community and the broader profession, is to lead a charge to do something similar with ACPE, the group that accredits pharmacy schools. Because I think that as we have evolved as a profession to look and care about the future of our students and their professional development, personal finance is included in that bucket of professional development. And so I think it just makes sense when we talk about the overall health of somebody, their overall fitness, finances has to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, Tim, I'm in complete agreement with you there. I think something needs to happen where personal finance is included in the educational system, because I think we're really not doing any of our students justice by not educating them and making sure that they have at least building blocks to understand personal finance in this atmosphere. So Tim, if I'm kind of your average person out there, or maybe someone that you'd be talking to on a regular basis, you guys use this word personal finance fitness. Can you talk about what that means and how I can get fit in personal finance, or how you would suggest doing that?
And that's why I love the word fitness, because I think it elevates the topic to one that is often overwhelming, one that often maybe grew up in a home where finances wasn't talked about much. But to me, it's like we invest in our personal health, like we invest in our marriages and relationships. We need to invest the time and energy into being financially healthy. We all know the feeling of what it is to be financially unhealthy. We know the stress that can bring. We know how that carries over into the workplace, into the home. And so when I sit down and talk with somebody, usually after a speaking event or a guest on the podcast, whomever, the first thing I'm trying to really assess, and one of the reasons I love personal finance, is that for every single person, it's different. And it almost feels to me like doing a medication therapy management encounter with a patient, and every patient is unique in terms of the medications they're taking, the personal factors that are influencing them, and the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And when it comes to personal finance, it's the same exact thing. There's so many variables in terms of, are they in a relationship with somebody else? Are their kids involved? Where are they at in their career progression? What's important to them? What are their goals financially? And you hear all different types of things from people. Some people are motivated by building wealth. Other people are motivated by giving. Other people are motivated by being able to travel. And so finding first the why of what you're trying to do with your financial future, to me, is the foundation of everything. And we talked about this on, I believe it was episodes 32 and 33 of the YFP podcast, this whole concept of developing your financial why. Because if you can first articulate, why am I trying to be financially healthy? What's the reason? What's the ultimate goal? And for everyone, that's different. Then we can start getting tactical. Let's start talking about goal setting and budgeting and paying down debt and investing and building an emergency fund and all the things we need to be doing. But if we don't first start with the why conversation, we're more likely than not to become overwhelmed and to lose the motivation along the way. So I would challenge your listeners to ask themselves that question right now. What is it that's driving me towards this concept of being financially free or having financial freedom? What's the end motivator? If somebody thinks about becoming maybe debt free or saving for retirement, we all know that just getting to that goal isn't usually the ultimate motivator. There's something behind that. There's either something generational, or there's peace of mind, or there's being able to achieve another goal, or whatever other motivation is out there. It's key to be able to identify and articulate that before you start getting tactical.
Yeah, and so I love the way that you described it as really that's what it is, personal finance fitness, because just like you said, when you think about anything, if it's personal health fitness, I think one of the reasons why a lot of people, have trouble with working out, just like personal finance, is if you don't have that passion or that reason why, and you don't keep coming back to that at the end of the day, it's going to be a struggle to keep moving forward. So I love the way that you guys, at YFP are helping people to think about personal finance fitness. I really think that that's an awesome thing. And that I'm sure you probably picked up on this, or that I'm a huge believer in that whole, finding out your why. And I know it comes from Simon Sinek. He has that book, Start With Why. And that was really, I think, game-changing ideology that I had come across as a student as well. So
absolutely,
really cool stuff, Tim. I think one of the big things that a lot of people are struggling with, and not just in pharmacy, but I think in education in general, is student loans and student loan debt. And I know that you have a lot to say about this, but I kind of want to I want to understand from your perspective, or what you're seeing out there, where do you see student loans heading in the future? Is there some sort of a tipping point where there's just going to be a cost that's too much? Where do you see student loans going?
This is a great question, and one that I think about daily, if not multiple times a day. And just to give the listeners some context here and what's been going on in pharmacy, is we've seen an increase in student indebtedness at a level and a rise in that indebtedness that we've never seen before. Just to give you an example of this, if we were to go back to somewhere around 2010, the average student would be coming out with around $100,000 of debt. Now we're looking at students that are coming out. We're waiting for the latest data from 2018, but 2017, that number was closer to $163,000 just in that time period. And one of the things I've picked up on quickly and even felt myself as I went through my own journey is that when student debt numbers become that big, there almost becomes a numbing effect to, it's going to be 120 or 160 or 180, or I've heard 250, 300, whatever. And we have to, in my opinion, sound the alarms a little bit that this is not normal. And if we look at second to that, pharmacy salaries alone are not keeping pace with inflation, let alone when you start to add in the rise in indebtedness. And so one of the questions that I keep asking is, what's the return on investment? What's the ROI of the pharmacy degree today versus what it was 8 years ago? I still think it's good, but it's changing. And one of the things I love about what you're doing, Deeb, is you're really, I think, challenging us as a profession to say, how can we be growing and evolving in a way that doesn't depend upon the traditional mindset that I think we've probably gotten too comfortable with? And I think that's going to mean a very different look for pharmacy in the future. I think there's lots of room for growth and innovation and entrepreneurship in the profession. But I'm concerned right now that people are coming out with significant debt loads. We've certainly seen a trend towards a more saturated job market, depending on the region that you're in. And we're also seeing a trend recently, I know we've talked about this on social media platforms, of employers cutting hours and doing other things. And I'm concerned about people living at the top of their income with massive debt loads and having no margin and expecting that salaries and other things may keep pace for 30 or 40 years. And we've got to be thinking differently about this. And I would encourage for anybody listening to this podcast that maybe is going to be a pharmacy student, currently a pharmacy student, what can you be doing to not only make yourself marketable from a career standpoint, but to be thinking in an entrepreneurial way, to be innovative, to be thinking in a pharmacy role that's maybe a non-traditional role as we see it today. But also, what can you be doing to minimize your debt loads so that you're prepared as a new practitioner to maybe take some of those risks that we, in my opinion, desperately need as a profession to be re-envisioning and reimagining the role of the pharmacist?
So, yeah, a couple of things stick out about kind of what your vision is and what you've seen. Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the numbers, just like you were saying, from X amount of years ago till today, and just take a look at the amount of debt people are coming out of pharmacy school with, it's pretty shocking. I mean, you always think, man, I wish I would have went to pharmacy school 20 years ago, so it was only X amount, and I could have paid that off a lot quicker. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and that's really, I think, one of the major attributes and things that we're trying to do with Pharmacy Universe, and that I'm trying to do with the podcast, is to get people to think about how things are going to continue to evolve in the future, and what can you do to be part of the evolution and not be left behind where, you are coming out with $200,000, $300,000 of debt, but you're not working in your career to, number one, understand finance and how to manage that, but number two, how to also advance your career, your practice, whatever
Absolutely.
It ends up being. So I'm definitely with you on that. So you had mentioned this a little bit, so I'm going to challenge you here. So what is your advice then for someone who's considering applying to pharmacy school in the near future with all this kind of doom, as I'll call it, of student loan debt and wages and all these different things in the job market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And often I feel like I could be conflicted in my answer, right? Because obviously I work for a college of pharmacy and I'm highly interested, and I firmly believe in the value of the Doctor of Pharmacy degree. What my feeling is right now is I'm an optimist by nature. I think your listeners probably can get a feel for that. But I'm one that tends to think that if we're in a tightening job market, if we're in a point where people might be frustrated, hours are getting cut, there's two ways to look at that. One is to throw up your arms and say, I'm doomed for the next 30 or 40 years. The other is to say, you know what, this is a prime opportunity for innovation and to start something new. And I would even just point to the news that came out last week of the buyout of PillPack by Amazon. You look at there, that's a 2012 graduate that started that company, rethinking the distribution of community pharmacy in a different way. And I think if we're not paying attention to trends like that, we're setting ourselves up to be the next Blockbuster in some capacity. And so my advice would be, is pharmacy a great profession? Without question. Does the role of the pharmacist play a significant necessary role on the patient care team? Without question. Do we have the evidence to show that pharmacists are improving patient outcomes and provide a valuable resource both in the outcomes as well as the financial component when it comes to the healthcare system? Without question. But if we're to sit here and say today that the traditional role of the pharmacist is going to be there in 10 years and get paid at the level it does today, I think we're fooling ourselves. And so I would say to somebody coming in, can you enter the profession and value the role of the pharmacist and reimagine what that could look like, and know that over the next 10, 15, 20-year period, as they enter that career, that's going to look very different. And I would encourage them to find mentors that think that way, people like yourself, to find colleges of pharmacy that are providing experiential sites and training models, and faculty that are doing innovative things like telehealth and different training models, and to make sure they're not just necessarily looking at all programs in an equal light, but really looking at them to say, are they pushing the envelope on the profession of pharmacy? Are they innovative? Are they adjusting their curriculum in a way that is pointing toward the future? And are they on a state level pushing the practice of the role of the pharmacist to be able to move forward in a way that I can really learn and to think about this future and the profession in a different way?
Yep. So I think the elephant's in the room now. I think you've got me all fired up because I feel as if that whole Amazon discussion, that always comes up, and it's something that I've been trying to follow, of course, for the past few years. Because, I mean, you're right. We can't be ignorant and think that what we're doing today is going to work tomorrow. And I try to encourage students, I try to encourage colleagues and other people to think about, look at pharmacy, but look at what's going on outside of pharmacy. So, what are the trends today? What is your average consumer of today? What are they going to want tomorrow? Because that's, I think, how we're going to get to models in healthcare that's going to be, more realistic, but also provide better care and also meet people's expectations. Because I think some of the things you think about is, today's society has things like Netflix where you can watch shows instantly. You don't have to wait in line. You have things like Amazon where you can order something and it's there the same day or the next day. You're not waiting in line. And not to say that, pharmacy and healthcare needs to be rushed. It's just there's a part of pharmacy, I believe, that needs to be more, number one, convenient, but also, number two, it just needs to be more hands-on so the patient is not worried about their time. We're not wasting the patient's time in terms of getting the actual medications or products or wellness, but we're focusing their time more on the education, and we're focusing their time more on understanding how to use the medication or the product or, whatever it is that we're helping the patients with. So I'm definitely on board with you there.
Absolutely. And one of the things I hear, kind of as pushback to that from pharmacists is, well, an Amazon model, whatever it be, is, that's not the optimal way to deliver healthcare. How we're doing it here or there is really better. And while we may disagree with the modalities and methods, whatever, the reality is, to your point, trends are shifting. And we need to be a part of the conversation, or else we're going to be left out of it. And one of the things I would love to see is more town halls, more open forums, more organization, communication, whatever method there is, podcasts like this, for us to have the difficult conversations about, this is the trend, this is where things are going. What are some ideas? How can we think differently? How can we innovate? What are the entrepreneurial opportunities that re-envision the role of the pharmacist? Because I think each and every year that goes by that we don't engage in those conversations, the harder the uphill battle is going to be for us to be a valuable model or valuable part of that team as that model evolves.
Yeah, and I think obviously, probably from your experiences too, that pharmacy is oftentimes not first to the foot race. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
part of the challenge. So Tim, if you had a magic wand and you could improve one thing or enact one movement in pharmacy, what do you think it would be and why?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. I mean, I think we're really slow to the pickup of telehealth in the profession. As I think about access to pharmacists being challenging, we don't necessarily have the volume that other professionals do. We see healthcare models adopting technology, and I think for us to really innovate in that space, obviously there's billing issues and other things that come along with that, but really leveraging more technology to get patients and providers comfortable with accessing pharmacist care all across the country. And I think we obviously know we have lots of rural areas where access to pharmacists is more difficult. And I would build on that to say, we've created, in my opinion, a lot of bureaucracy, rules, regulations, tape, whatever we want to call it, on our own end that's handcuffing what the practice of pharmacy could be. And I know you've had guests on that have really challenged that notion and thought, and I love that. And I think more evolution in that area, to maybe even in the areas that some would view to be uncomfortable, would be healthy. And obviously, Deeb, on the financial side, I would love to see, and I alluded to this earlier, but I would love to see, specifically in pharmacy education, a movement towards standardization and requirement around personal finance education. We see some schools that are really adopting this, picking it up, but it's very sporadic, and there's certainly not a broader movement in that area yet.
I love both of those ideas, Tim, especially of course, being in academia, the one about having personal finance within curriculums. So, Tim, I'll ask you one last question before we get wrapped up here. What challenge or action, I guess, do you propose to the listeners who might be listening to the podcast to take in the near future?
Yeah, the one thing I would encourage your listeners to do, and again, this links up a little bit with my career path and interest around professional development, is I think as we graduate from pharmacy school, life starts to happen. Maybe it's family, marriage, just busy work schedules, whatever. We tend to lose that motivation and excitement around professional development. I'm a big advocate for writing personal goals and reviewing those personal goals every single day. And I've read lots of books and resources. It took me many years to start doing this, but an amazing thing happens when you start to write your goals down, whether it's goals related to your professional life, whether it's financial goals, whether it's personal fitness goals, whether it's goals related to parenting, marriage, relationships, spiritual goals. When you start to write those down and they're specific and they're measurable, all the things that we know and we work with our patients when it comes to goals, and you look at those every day, you start to imagine those coming to reality. An amazing thing happens is what looks to be an out of mind goal, like I want to pay off my student loans in 3 years, like I want to be a better father, a better husband, and specifically what can I do in those areas? When you revisit those each and every day, an amazing thing happens that you start to really become optimistic and believe that those are going to happen. So my challenge to the listeners would be sit down and think about the 4 most important areas in your life. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's professional, maybe it's relationships, maybe it's as a parent, a significant other, whatever that would be, and give yourself very specific goals that you want to achieve. And the way I like to frame this for my students is fast forward 5 years and think about these 4 areas of your life and what would define success that you would look back and say, I'm doing an awesome job in these 4 areas. What would be happening in each of those 4 areas? Once you can envision and see what's happening in each of those 4 areas, you can then say today, right now, what is the goal? What is the step that I need to take to start making that become a reality in 5 years? Write those goals down, keep that 5-year vision, that window, if you will, in mind, and start to put that plan in place each and every day. So my challenge would be start to develop personal and professional goals in the areas that are most important in your life and look at those on a daily basis.
I think that that's an awesome calling and movement to definitely challenge. And I hope that, anybody who comes across this or who has listened to this definitely even thinks about even starting with, one area, let's say.
Yeah.
I tell people to just start small if you can, if it's intimidating, and if you can just start doing one of those areas and work your way up, then I think you're on a path to bettering yourself. So, Tim, as we wrap up here, we like to have you as the guest pose one question for any of the listeners and followers out there to answer. and they can answer that via comments, via email, via whatever method that they'd like to on the social platforms. So, Tim, if you have one question for the listeners and followers out there, what would it be?
Yeah, and this question is really designed to help out our students and those that are trying to put themselves in a better financial position in the future. So the question is, what is one piece of advice you would have for a P1 student for how they could position themselves to be financially successful? So if you could think back to when you were starting out pharmacy school, you think about what's going on now financially. What's one piece of advice you would have for a P1 student for how they could position themselves to be financially successful in the future?
All right, you heard it here. Leave your comments, your suggestions, your feedback on the social platforms, and we will both be looking forward to hearing from you. So, Tim, I'd like to thank you again for coming on and sharing a lot of your experiences, your thoughts, and your vision of personal finance and pharmacy, as well as what the future of pharmacy could and maybe should look like. I'd like to thank you again, and until next time, my friend.
Thank you, Dee. Pleasure to be on here, and keep up the great work with what you're doing.
Thank you.
Tim's vision of personal finance and building a community to help support as well as provide tools, opportunities, and resources for those in pharmacy to be able to better understand and reach toward that goal of becoming financially fit and financially free is, I think, just an awesome movement and testament to his ability to find his passion and purpose and go after it. If you haven't already, check out his website, www.yourfinancialpharmacist.com. They have an awesome blog. They also have a podcast, which you can type in YFP or Your Financial Pharmacist podcast, and you'll be able to find that. I'll also leave links to their pages and their podcast in the description below, so be sure to check those out. And be sure to interact with Tim and kind of ask him questions or ask their group questions if you have those. Again, Pharmacy Universe, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Be sure to check out our Facebook, our Twitter, our LinkedIn pages, and our newly launched Instagram page. Leave us some feedback, some comments. Make sure you answer Tim's question. And until next time, your host, signing off, D. Bede.